It's a really, really good question. I used to run a company. I had 115 employees. I had 100 sales guys that worked for me. So I built a pretty big, not big, it's relative. I built a relatively large company. We did over 120 million. I bootstrapped it. I didn't know about reading a P&L. I've told this story many times. Didn't know how to read a P&L, didn't know what a balance sheet was, didn't know what cash flow statements were. I built all that, well, we built that from the ground up.
And you learned by doing.
I learned a lot. So that Alex Hormozi quote I seen like 2 weeks ago, where it's like the first business you had is not the one you get rich on, it's the one you learn in. So I have applied all of that, Alexio, into this business. What to do, what not to do. Obviously don't know it all, I'm learning every day, which is why I love business as well. But to answer your question, I mean, yeah, I love work, dude. Like, I love to work. I love making money. I love building new relationships, like with a guy like you who's out doing it. We talked about that on the phone today when we were a little bit prepping. Like guys that are really getting after it, that are really making money, really investing their money and doing the thing, it gives me so much energy, bro, because I don't come from a lot, man. I come from very, very humble beginnings, and the opportunity that we have in real estate, in this city, in this space, the way that debt works, the way that equity works, the way that we have the internet now where you can learn, we have YouTube University, you go on podcasts, books.
Best time to be alive. Easy.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And people are like, you know, this and that, and like, it doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on.
Now.
Whatever side you're on, it doesn't matter your politics, bro. Like at the end of the day, it's all green. Go get it.
Exactly, and there's no excuse. It used to be encyclopedia. I got to go buy the Britannica. I got to meet this guy to figure it out. The information's all there. All you got to do is like follow a guy that is doing something that you're interested in, and over time, next thing you know, you're going to be understanding a lot more about that subject, probably more than that instructor or professor that you were following in university who was doing this 10 years ago, because so much has changed in 10 years. You're going to be getting the information from someone who's doing it today, and I think that's way more valuable than what you see in a textbook. It's always
agreed. You can learn information, something that you're really hyper-focused on, you can learn quickly.
At your own pace.
I will say this too, Alexio, just to go back to your question. I mean, yeah, you obviously get spread thin, but the point is that you have to build systems. And that's what a business actually is. It's systems, so you can make money in your sleep. You can plug and play. There's a problem with an employee and you have to, part ways. You can plug someone else into the system and you manage the system. Now, from a ground up business or a startup, that's a heavy lift. It's a lot of work. It's why companies fail. Often they run out of cash, they run out of time, they run out of momentum, they run out of energy, and oftentimes they don't even have the right product. So we've pressure tested our business every way we can. It's the same way we approach investing. We have a thesis, we don't steer clear from it. We don't fudge the numbers to make it work. Either it works or it doesn't, and this works, man. I mean, you're in the game. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit, and this thing is going to explode, bro.
So much opportunity.
It's going to explode.
All it takes is someone to understand even just the most basic zoning laws, and then start looking around at properties that are even available on the market. And no one even makes that extra effort, and you can find value anywhere where you can add it, whether that's an ADU, converting a garage, knowing, oh, hey, this happens to be in a high density complete community zone. That means I can build 4 stories and I can do 8 units back here. Maybe I'll just buy this thing, put the business plan together, and then I'll flip it to someone else for $100,000, $200,000 profit, wholesale it. Or I'll build it out myself and maybe shoot for $1 million if I can put together the pieces, the equity and the debt. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's just about how many of these can you handle, how many inspectors can you talk to, how many contractors, teams can you manage.
Yeah, that really is business, right? Time.
Right.
And especially in the entrepreneurial world, it's time. How big can you go? How big should you go? Right? More is not always more. And then you got to know what you're doing too, because you can get your lunch ate pretty quick.
Oh yeah. Well, I have, luckily, I've been only involved in projects that have been profitable. It's just, we were talking about maybe some of the biggest challenges in our careers. One of the biggest challenges I've faced in my career was this 5-unit project east of downtown. I call it Naranja University. It was supposed to be an 18-month project where I renovate all 5 units, and then I convert all 5 garages into 5 ADUs.
I think I saw you post about this. It was you vacated them all at the same time, and then some vagrants got in.
So rough area town. It's near where they call the 4 corners of death. I think it's Euclid and Market is what they call that. This
tough area.
Yeah, super rough. And I think it's improved a lot since they used to call it the 4 corners of death.
I really don't think we have a ghetto in San Diego, for the record.
Right.
There are places in the country and in the world that are way worse.
yeah.
I think that's one of the probably the roughest hoods though in the city actually.
I would agree. So anyway, I kind of came in as one of my first projects. I had to evict the tenants because it was just really bad living conditions, and I was going in to clean it up and improve it. There's mold everywhere. There's like roaches in every corner. Like it was not good. Fixer.
Yeah.
So I went in, fixed all the units, vacated them all at the same time. Ended up with vagrants moving in. I had to hire like round-the-clock security. It was a total nightmare. I rushed to get those fixed up and tenants in there, because tenants, you find out later after experience, are free security, because when there's people in there with lights, people aren't going to come knocking around because someone's going to call the cops.
100%.
So, in fact, they're paying you and they're giving you security. So
and they're paying down your principal.
Yeah. So,
and they're creating cash flow.
Exactly. So luckily, this project made sense just as a 5-unit. But I also had submitted permits to convert, because San Diego has a rule for you can convert non-habitable square footage into unlimited ADUs. That's how it read when the ADU laws came out. And I think that's still how it reads. When I heard that, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is the move, because as a broker, I know the price per unit's a big metric for banks and buyers. And I know that if I can convert this only, I think it was 1,000 square feet of garage space in total, 5 garages, 200 square feet each, into 5 units, that price per unit's metric is going to come way down, and it's going to help me get a higher value on the exit. I'm going to get higher cash flow because I get better rent per square foot on smaller units.
Question, how are you, because this is interesting as a broker, right? I know a bunch of brokers in the space.
Yeah.
We talked about that. We know a bunch of the same guys. How are you running comps, Lexio? So are you using comps? Are you using cap rates?
Well, it depends on the property. If you're under 4 units, you have to use, if closer to 4 units, you use like a little mix of a cap rate and comp approach. But
if you have, let's say on this property, right, you had 5 and then you added 5 or you converted 5. I don't know if you did, you're going to finish the story, but let's say you have 10. Mm-hmm. You can't comp that out with a proper 10-unit multifamily. It's not the same.
Well, no, you
asset.
can now. Yeah, so, that's how we comp it out. And that's how buyers are honestly buying these things. And we're selling, there's people building 24 ADUs in North Park. They're going to sell it as a 24-unit apartment building, because the type of buyer buying those type of products, they have access to the same financing. That's the difference why I said 4 units and under is different, because your financing is different. And the financing, they have to have exact comparable sales. They don't care about the cap rate. 5 units and up, it's just a cap rate approach. And those lenders don't care whether it's an ADU or a unit.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do some research about that, because I've heard mixed thoughts about that. Obviously 1 to 4 is 1 to 4, right?
Right.
But I've heard mixed thoughts about parking. I've heard mixed thoughts about how it's essentially written in the code, deed restrictions, all this stuff comparatively,
right,
apples to apples, if the numbers actually align for a proper multifamily zoned 20 unit or 10 comparatively to a 5 unit or a 4, and then you add 4 ADUs.
Well, my experience is that if there's no, as you know, some ADUs, if you're going to do more than a certain density of ADUs, you end up with affordability restrictions or a deed restriction like a junior, where you have to live on site. When there's those kind of deed restrictions involved, then you got to start incorporating affordable comparables. You've got a limit on how much you can get on the rent, and also you have to deal with the housing commission, and that's just extra paperwork every year. People are going to want a little bit of a premium or a discount, for dealing with that extra headache. But in my case, I've just got 5 non-deed restricted garage converted ADUs. Let's
get back to that. Okay, so you brought the tenants in. You had a little bit of a rough go when you were rehabbing it. You brought the new tenants in.
So I got the new tenants in, and we rented those units. We got great rent, and over the years, the rent's gone up dramatically since COVID. But in the planning process for my ADUs, this was really early. I was like one of the first multi-ADU projects in San Diego that hit the city, and not to mention it was COVID, and there were like no reviewers, so that just delayed every single one way. It was like you'd send an email and you get an email back like a month later. It was really slow. But anyway,
COVID was terrible.
It was the worst. I hated it.
For the cities, bro.
It was the worst for everybody. I don't know why we really shut down like we did. Anyway, different subject. But we submitted, and I had the option. They said, hey, you're going to get stuck with MEP unless you do an air gap, because you're going to have 5 units touching. And if you have more than 2 units touching, you have to do California Building Code, MEP.
ADA.
Yeah, and I didn't want to do that. And at the time, I don't think I had to do ADA, but now that's been implemented since. But at the time, I didn't want to do that because I had only 200 square foot units. I didn't want to give up a foot, because that's literally like 20 square feet. That's like 10% of one of my units. I was like, no, I'm just going to do the MEP. Hindsight, I should have just done 4 units, because it was it ended up costing me 3 extra years of just going back and forth with the city. We go one way and we'd overcome one challenge, and then we'd say, okay, well, we're going to use these 2 different water meters, and then they're like, we get all the way to the finish line, and there's 5 departments talking. 4 of them say okay, the 5th one says no, and then you got to go back to the drawing report. And then
Case in point, why you got to get started though, that's 100% what I talk about on my podcast all the time, you guys. You got to earn your reps, you got to earn your stripes. Alexio is making a very, very valid point, which is, hey, look, he knows now he's not going to do that again. It's going to be, look, simple, fast. If I actually break this thing down and pencil it out, underwrite it the proper way, what is my actual return? More is not always more. What type of inventory I'm bringing to market, what type of unit, where that unit is, can I afford to not have parking? Should I have parking? Should I not? What's coming online? All of that stuff matters in this game. What I'm bringing, like how I'm building these things. Am I going R3? Am I going R2? And what are the pros and cons to both?
To me, I think where the line is drawn is you better be going like an extra 3 units or more if you're going to go to R2, which is the MEP. If you're going to not get more than 3 extra units, then I would just stick with R3 and just call it a day, because that R2 is going to cost you an extra year and just a series of nightmares and headaches that just aren't worth it. They aren't worth it.
I mean, the planner thing is a huge thing. You know, going from 4 planners to 12 planners, you have...
And 4 different inspectors versus the one that kind of just jack of all trades lets a lot of things slide.
That's right. Yeah, and they're not always talking to one another. And then you have obviously the utilities. I mean, I don't have a number in my head where I'm like, this is the unit count that makes sense. I always look at every project, you know, individually. But I mean, that's an interesting approach. I think the point I'm making though is that you learn by doing. And I talk about that all the time. Like you gotta earn that. Like you have that experience now, Alexio. Whereas if someone who's was afraid to take that jump for the pain of or the loss of money, the value of the knowledge that you have in your mind is going to make you so much money in the long run.
Yeah, Naranja University is like prime me for like all the projects I do now, where we make like, you know, $500,000 to $1 million per project over like a year to 18 months. And I would not be comfortable or even in any position to like make these decisions to execute on the purchase if I hadn't been through this experience that was daunting, but it taught me so much. And you know, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't do MEP again. I think the biggest learning lessons from that were I need to be working with a team that has the experience, has already done that before, because the teams I was working with, they were also I was the guinea pig. So they were learning based off of what my project was doing.
I'm not going to mention any names.
No, you don't need to. In the end, they actually pulled through. They stuck by my side, so I really appreciate them for that. But you need to be working with experienced people who've done exactly what you're trying to do, because they will have the bird's eye view to avoid a lot of obstacles and save you from a 4-year project to keep it under your timeline of maybe a year or 18 months. And as you know, there's holding costs involved. You got to pay the principal and the interest on your note. You got to pay the property taxes.
Burn, baby, burn. You got to burn, baby.
That's just money disappearing in the wind, into the wind as you're waiting.
Time is the killer of deals, guys.
Because time literally is money in this business, because until you're actually making money on your project, you're losing money every month because you're paying the bank, you're paying property taxes, you're paying insurance. So that's a big burn. We call it the bleed. And you don't want to be bleeding for 4 years. Luckily, that project, if you are going to get involved, ADUs is a great way because you already have the 5 units. Those 5 units were paying my mortgage, and they were making cash flow. Like, it was already a good deal with just the 5 units. Imagine if I had just vacant land, which happens to people, and you're paying all this stuff on land that's not making you a dime. It's just straight bleed. And you're planning on 1 year, it takes you 4 years. That's 4 times. That could eat up all of the cash, all of the upside that you're planning on making.
There's a couple ways you could do that deal. Number one would be you JV with the landowner, and they essentially put up the dirt as their portion of the equity for the upside.
Yeah.
If you buy the dirt yourself, it's really hard to get debt because lenders see the glass half empty.
Right.
And so they want to have something to attach to if, God forbid, something goes wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Where with dirt, they don't have that because it's not entitled. It's less valuable. Now, for us as investors with infill development, we've already mitigated a lot of that risk, right? So we're not properly entitling. It's technically not entitling at all, but if I buy a piece of dirt, you know, let's say way out in, I don't know, Marietta or something, and it's just dirt. Now, a big developer would come in, obviously buy that dirt, right, go through tentative and final maps,
Yeah, entitle it.
entitle the property, and then they could sell it off to, say, KB Homes or Lennar or a big builder who buys it entitled
And they got
then
their own
goes
line of
out
credit,
and
yeah.
does all the infrastructure. Where
Yeah.
for us, we don't really have to do that often. And I think sometimes in this, and I'll ask you again as a broker, Alexio, sometimes I run into guys who are like, they're trying to make the same amount of money on a deal because of the zoning, but half the lot is unbuildable. And they don't really make the connection that you're essentially losing the value of the dirt that we can't build on because there's either a ravine or there's going to be a retaining wall.
Well, every seller's shit doesn't stink. So
Of course not,
you have
dude.
You have to work through and manage
$60
expectations.
billion,
And there's a gold mine underneath. No,
100%.
it's a matter of talking to these owners, and what's really helpful is not only has this helped me in terms of doing more deals myself, like in terms of equity projects where I'm building ADUs, but like the knowledge that Naranja University and all these other projects that I'm working on has made me so much more valuable as a broker because I can just speak this language and be an incredible resource to buyers and sellers. We can talk about business models to help achieve sellers higher expectations of purchase price that other brokers just don't have the confidence to talk about.
I love that, dude.
So
we're
it's just-
speaking the same language.
They all mesh together, and then I manage 60 units for my family at the same time. So when I was asking you about hats at the beginning of this, I've worried quite a few right now, and it's like overwhelming. But even on the management side, that experience has also helped me be more effective as a broker because I know how to interact with tenants. I've served 60-day notices. I've talked to the tenants, humanized them, talked to them, found ways to negotiate and get a cash out cash
And that's
fees
part of the
and
job.
help them around. But you really have to have all of these tenants you have to understand all of these. Otherwise, you go in, you're like, okay, I got the construction knowledge. I know how to buy a property, but man, this property's got tenants. How am I going to get them out? I read the stories online. What about squatters? All that stuff. You're missing that key pillar that you need, the confidence of how to work with the people that already are on the property and the know-how and the confidence to know how to remove them. And,
Yeah, the
and
experience
do it the right
of
way.
doing the thing is invaluable, bro.
Right.
We're dealing with two tenants. Well, we're almost there. We're dealing with that right now. I think, having some sales acumen, like leading from a place of empathy, service, being kind, just in general, understanding that that's a human being, whether they're paying the
Exactly,
rent or
yeah.
not, it's a human. So being able to navigate that line of, okay, at the end of the day, this is an asset. At the end of the day, I'm on the hook. My team is on the hook for this money.
Yeah.
So this has to move forward. But how can we do it with some compassion?
So Jonathan, you're wearing all these other hats. Do you just offload that to a management company, or are you the person talking to the tenants yourself? Because that's a tough conversation for an average Joe to have.
It depends on the situation. I am generally like, if something's tough and it's not getting done, I will just step in often to help get it done. Because I feel like, what's his name? Jensen Nvidia.
Oh yeah, the CEO of NVIDIA.
Yeah. Jensen Huang, I want to say his name,
Right,
something
yeah.
like that. He used to clean toilets.
Right.
Nothing is beneath me. I used to clean toilets. In fact, I've cleaned more toilets than all of you in this room. So I'm the same way.
Yeah,
Like I'm just
we get in the trenches. Yeah.
100%, bro. Like I'll close a deal. I'll talk to a tenant. Obviously dealing with equity and lenders and all that stuff I do all the time. But you've asked me a ton of questions, bro. Let me ask you some questions.
All right, for sure. Let's do it.